It's once again time to get mad, bad, and crazy because the Battletoads are back for a rematch here in the Lucha Review Arena. They're coming at us in 16-bit on the Super Nintendo. So, my luchadors, if you're feeling froggy, tag yourselves in and let's have this rematch with the Nerdy and Dirty.
Two years after their debut on the Nintendo, the Battletoads arrived in the Super Nintendo in a sequel called Battlemaniacs. In this game, these amphibious humanoids from outer space have established a headquarters in Tibet. It sounds ridiculous at first, but as it turns out, several species of frogs are native to that part of the world, so this actually makes sense. Hooray for zoology. The Toads are still at the beck and call of this little cock, and he summoned them to unveil this virtual reality training simulator called the Gamescape. The reality of this Gamescape isn't all that virtual because one of the Dark Queen's pigmen breaks through it and runs off with Professor T-Bird's boss's daughter? His boss's daughter? That implies he's been on Earth for a while and hasn't turned up in a top secret research facility or in a frying pan. She was never part of the Battletoads universe, and to my knowledge, she never appeared in any other game. But it was really important for you to get a brief introduction before she's apprehended by Putz the Tragic Dragon. Oh, and if you still wanted to pick your favorite Toad to embark on the rescue mission, you could still fuck right off, because Zitz will not be joining us. Despite the Super Nintendo's capability of involving up to 4 players in a single game, the Battletoads insisted on making do with 2. Another constant was the lack of choice. Player 1 would be assigned to Pimple, and if you did have a player 2, at least this time you could play without hurting each other, allowing for a truly cooperative playing experience. Thus far, that's the only improvement from the original Nintendo game. Battlemaniacs is what Battletoads might have been had it been developed for the Super Nintendo instead. It's practically the same game with just a little more story to it. Like the original, Stage 1 is a traditional side-scrolling beat-em-up. Even the colors and landscape are similar. Evil pigmen will try stopping you from making any progress, and this time, they're aided by living skeletons with swords and shields. I'm guessing one of the concept artists had just seen Jason and the Argonauts before production started. The Gamescape is going to fuck with you too, and at times, pigmen and skeleton knights will be the least of your problems. The very ground beneath your webbed feet is even more determined to stop you from reaching the next stage, and like the first Battletoads, your success was determined by memory and repetition. Timing was also crucial because without it, this giant man-rock pig would make quick work of you. You had to know when to hold 'em, know when to fold 'em, know when to walk away, and know when to run if you were going to avoid becoming a pancake, and you had time to maybe get in 3 good hits before the process repeated itself. Stage 2 offered up a more lethal version of the descent from the NES Battletoads. The birds were replaced by alien wasps, and you could not use their stingers as weapons like you were able to do with the bird beaks. Also reappearing were the cheap knockoffs of the Castlevania Bone Dragons and little robots that shot out volts of electricity. Rats and spiked helmets would be shot out of cannons, fans would blow you into hazards, and apparently the Battletoads all had that same surgery Wolverine had during the Weapon X project because the magnets could easily pull you back and forth. Thankfully, the 5 Lives cheat code was brought up into this new game as well, and with it, I was able to get to the bottom of this pit. Much to my surprise, the Dark Queen, who's also received a few enhancements on the Super Nintendo, cuts the Toads a break and invites them to play a bonus round in the Gamescape. In the bonus round, you slide across a chessboard while trying to knock down as many bowling pins as you can. For every 100 you hit, a bonus life would be added to your character, and it is not easy. Death pins and interlopers will harm your score, and it's easy to get distracted by how beautiful the stage is. Between the chess pieces and the playing cards, you finally feel like you're in a gigantic virtual reality game world. Luckily, if you mash on the pause button enough, you'll slow the speed down to something a little more manageable, making it easier to last longer and ultimately earn more. Lots of fun. And now, the Toads go back to their mission. Okay, so since Stage 1 was basically a remake and Stage 2 was basically a remake, does that mean Yup, here we go again. The fucking turbo tunnel. Why? There's nothing in there. It's empty space. There are no enemies in there. And this time you don't get a fucking warning of what's coming. This is the Super Nintendo. Super Mario Kart and F-Zero both came before this game, proving that a first-person view can be handled at high speeds. Look at this shit. Not even the rapid-fire pause trick helps you much here. Why did this game have to be so fucking ridiculous? Okay, time for a pause break. Wow. This sucks. Somehow, some way, I made it to the other end of the tunnel, and waiting for me was the remake of The Snake Pit. Admittedly, it was a little easier than the original, while the snakes looked more like actual living snakes, as opposed to the original's robot snakes from Mega Man 3. The next stage was entirely new for me, and if it was a remake of anything from the original, I'll never know because I never made it that far. In this stage, you ride a scooter on a roller coaster track that doesn't have a single curve or loop. Even in a video game world in which humanoid toads are trying to fight a hooker, a roller coaster track with 90-degree turns seems fucking ridiculous, especially when you're being chased by a rat with a giant pizza cutter. You can't do anything to gain speed either, but if you turn too soon, you're fucking out. All you can do is maintain speed, which requires you to memorize the turns and time them perfectly, all while ducking below the low-hanging walls along the track, which seem to have zero effect on your pursuer. This is where I drew the line with this fucking job. Once again, you're limited to 2 toads, you can't choose which one to play, and I don't see any battles anywhere. I just see a stress-inducing collection of vehicle missions and obstacle courses. I'd rather be a contestant on a Japanese game show, because Battlemaniacs is a fucking scam. The title uses the word battle twice this time, and actually has far less combat than I remembered from the original. The characters and the landscapes were a joy to behold, as it did feel like this was how the Battletoads were meant to be presented. The heightened quality of graphics, sound, and story made the game feel like a living comic book, but the game's refusal to use the Super Nintendo to its fullest potential just seemed blasphemous, while the game's difficulty felt borderline vindictive. It was like the developers wanted to punish us for wanting a better Battletoads game. That leaves the score at Lucha Review 2, Battletoads 0. And the Battletoads will get one last shot at the championship. Only this time, they're bringing the Double Dragons. Because next week, in an explosive tag team main event, it's Lucha Review versus Battletoads Double Dragon. Thanks for tagging in, and I'll see you next week.